Shalom. This is Barzal coming in the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahushai Bahashem, Rakha Kodash. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone and to hopeful elect pushing his word in truth and sincerely across the four corners of the earth. This lesson is going to be titled, The end is almost here. Stay watching. Right? So let me just pull up an article. Okay, so there's an article on End Times headlines. So there's a bunch of stuff I'm going to pull up. It says, vaccinated... It says, vaccinated people can now make up a majority of CID deaths. We can no longer say this is a pandemic of the unvaxxed. Right, so now they're admitting it. Right, so let's just click this real quick. For the first time, a majority of Americans dying from the C virus received at least the primary series of the vaccine. 58% of C virus deaths in August were people who were vaccinated or boosted. According to an analysis conducted for the Health 202 by Cynthia Cox, Vice President at the Kaiser Family Foundation. It is a continuation of a troubling trend that has emerged over the past year as vaccination rates have increased and new variants appeared. The share of deaths of people who were vaccinated has been steadily rising. In September 2021, vaccinated people made up just 23% of the coronavirus fatalities. In January and February this year, it was up to 42%. Wow. Per our colleague Finit Nerapil and Dan Keaton. We can no longer say this is the pandemic of the unvaccinated, Cox told the Health 202. Being unvaccinated is still a major risk factor for dying from COVID-19, but efficacy wanes over time. An analysis out last week from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention highlights the need to get blah, 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 blah. Okay. Yeah, of course, you can see is the Fauci guy is still trying to push that, even though he admitted stuff that's contrary. Anyways, I just want to bring that out to show, that the elect, right? The elect didn't take this, this concoction that they're trying to give people, right? Because we're always watching. The scriptures tell you not to take it. Never trust thine enemy. Actually, let me get that. Never. Actually, let me read this first. I'll go to that. So 2 Corinthians 2:11. At least Satan should get an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices. So we're not ignorant of his devices, right? All his tools and contraptions and tricks that he tries to use to catch people, or to basically catch people, right? So that those injections that they're giving for the past 2 years is another one of his devices. But we were not ignorant to it. We are knowing to it. We knew about it, right? We understood, right? We had the knowledge of his devices, which is why we weren't ignorant to it. Right? So Psalms 71. Say Ecclesiasticus. I think it's in Sirach. Okay, well, I'm not gonna find it right now. You know the scriptures. Never trust thine enemy, right? So Esau, Edom, Idumea, he's the enemy of Israel. So why would we trust anything he says? Anything he tries to give you, especially when it comes to pharmaceuticals, right? The food stuff, you have to obviously be aware, but you can only maneuver how you can maneuver it because the scriptures say you shall eat poison and live, right? So a lot of the stuff we eat is poison, right? But we shall live because the Lord's taking care of us, he's protecting us, right? But when it comes to pharmaceuticals, yeah, you can't trust them because you already know they tinker and they twist and all this other stuff. And on top of it, we're not supposed to be taking shots. Right, the Lord told us not to do that. So he told us not to do that, and our enemies giving us shots should tell you not to take it, right? So there's another article. Okay. No. Well, that's interesting. It says the WHO and CDC are now warning us that measles is an imminent global threat. So there's another thing, right? And the scriptures say about the Lord's going to send plagues. So these are plagues that are sending, right? Whether Esau's releasing them or whether they're just appearing, And at the end of the day, the Lord's doing it. Lord Yahweh Shem Yoshai. Okay, so this is another one I want to look at. I don't know what that is. So, endtimeheadlines.org says, rinse and repeat. CID cases in China are exploding and dissent grows over new tyrannical lockdowns. Right? So it's happening again. The lockdowns are happening in China all over again because that virus is spreading again, just like before. And it usually happens around this time. Right? Now we're getting down to the winter months. So you have November, December, January, February, and a little bit into March. This is when that virus appeared and was spreading. And it spread it in China first, right? And it came to the West. China on Thursday reported a record number of daily CID infections as a nationwide surge in cases heaps pressure on the country's increasingly unpopular zero-tolerance approach to the virus. Wow. The National Health Commission recorded 31,444. So that's 144. You have, wow, that's spiritual. You got the number 3, which is understanding. You have 144 with 4 threes. Wow. Well, somebody's going to come out of this situation that's happening in China. Locally transmitted cases on Wednesday surpassing the previous peak of 29,317 recorded April 13 during Shanghai's months-long lockdown. And people don't even know that they've been on lockdown for a while. People, because you don't hear about China and what's really going on too much. Like the rest of the world, unless you have those news platforms where you can see what's happening around the world. But if you're just watching typical news, you're not going to know that China's been on lockdown. China's been on lockdown for a while, The surge is being fueled by outbreaks in multiple cities and comes despite a refusal by authorities to end tight infection controls, even in the face of an increasing and unprecedented backlash against their hardline approach of incessant lockdowns, quarantines, and mass testing mandates. Meanwhile, a trickle CID-related fatalities has added further pressure to the mix. Beijing on Wednesday recorded its 4th CID-related death since last weekend, alongside 1,648 local infections, its 3rd consecutive day of more than 1,000 local cases. On Thursday, city officials said they were converting a major exhibition center into a makeshift hospital for the quarantine and treatment of CID patients. Yeah, so that's how it starts. And if you watch these movies in Netflix or Prime, they have Outbreak, Quarantine, those type of titles. And it's the same MO that they go through. That they start to convert these stadiums and these big, basically big stadiums into hospitals, and then they change from hospitals into quarantine camps because, really, quarantine camps is the same thing, right? Because first it's a hospital, but then you have to quarantine the people, right? If I have to quarantine someone, they're you know what? Let's go into the word quarantine. Let's just see what it means. Because first, hospital, you're kind of treating the person for whatever they have, right? But then when quarantine is slightly different. So the period, because they can say anything for a reason why they have to quarantine you. It's based on what they say, because they're the devil, right? It's a beast, the red dragon. Period. A ship suspected of carrying contagious diseases and kept in isolation. Okay, so that's where it comes from. So it's keeping you in isolation, right? So they might use this outbreak again to, kind of push that agenda of quarantining people and putting them in isolation, which is also, when you're in isolation, you're also going to, what's the word I'm looking for? Concentration camps. Concentration camps, you're in quarantine, right? And you're in isolation, right? What's the other definitions they have here? Put under quarantine, to isolate, right? As by authority. So they can use that for another agenda to say you're being quarantined. Maybe you don't have the C-hip, you got to be quarantined because they're going to combine the C-hip with these shots, right? Oh, okay, here we go. So quarantine, enforced isolation of patients suffering from a contagious disease in order to prevent the spread of disease. Exactly. So they can use that to say, since we don't want the disease to spread, and maybe you've been in contact with someone, we're going to put you in quarantine, in isolation, which is going to mean a concentration camp. So they're going to put all the people that are considered hazardous threats, right? Because they might have or been in contact with someone with a contagious disease in one area, which is a camp, right? Isolation to prevent the spread of infectious disease, right? Placed in enforced isolation as for medical reasons, right? So that's how they can push that. You say we're quarantining you, but it's gonna be forced, right? They're gonna bring the military, right, and force you to be in quarantine, right? Just like in these movies where people, like, you see these movies, these medical or virus movies where people weren't even in contact with these people, but they're just, because now it's just part of their law where we're taking everyone in this area of this neighborhood, because one person was found with this virus or whatever, we're locking down the whole neighborhood. Everyone's going in quarantine, right? Or maybe you're at work and someone got tested positive for, the virus, and now everyone that worked there is in quarantine, right? And they can pull any type of reason to put you in quarantine. Forced isolation, which is concentration, which is what concentration camps are. It's forced isolation from everyone else, right? Okay, so let me just see if there's more. How much more is there? Okay, I'll just keep reading. Actually, let me get the scriptures. So now let's go to Matthew. But the thing is, the elect are watching. They're seeing all this and they're watching. They're making the preparations to the best of their ability, of course, because we can't fight Satan because we're sheep in the midst of wolves, roughly paraphrasing, right? But all we can do is make our preparations, which are more, our preparations are spiritual preparations with Yahweh Hashem Yahushai, make sure we're good with him, doing our work. We're on good terms with the Lord, right? The Father and the Son, Yahweh and Yahushai, because at the end of the day, he's the one that's going to save us out of these situations that are coming, because we can't do anything. What are we going to really do? What, we're going to fight back with guns and all that? You can't do that. It's a waste of time, right? First of all. And you can't fight Esau with his own blessing, right? And also the scriptures read, our weapons of our warfare are not carnal. So a gun is a carnal thing. Weapons are carnal things, like physical weapons, right? We have spiritual weapons, which is the scriptures, which is why you just got to push the truth. Keep going to highways and byways, keep prophesying, keep doing your videos, study, right? That's how you fight, right? And the Lord's watching you do it. So the elect are going to be doing these things, these spiritual things, these spiritual preparations, right? So in Matthew 24 and 24, I don't think this is the right one. Okay, yes, Matthew 24 and 24. For there shall arise false Christs, which is happening. We got the Ronald Dalton, I think is his name, right? He's portraying himself as like Yahushai, as he's the one that's come to deliver Israel. He's telling these Israelites to go to Africa, right? So now they're looking to him for salvation, right? Because like he has all the answers, which he doesn't. He's a false Christ, right? And false prophets. He's a false prophet, and shall shew great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect, right? So if it was possible, they should deceive the very elect, but they're not going to deceive the very elect. That's what I said, if it were possible. But it's not possible to deceive the elect, because the elect are of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai, right? They're being fed directly from Yahushai on what's happening. What's the game plan? We have the elect have the cheat codes to what's going on in this game, right? They have the script to the movie. So you have the script to the movie, the cheat codes to the game. How can you be fooled? You can't, right? Unless you have the incorrect cheat codes or the incorrect script, then you're not one of the elect. Revelation 12 and 12. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he had but a short time. And that's why the devil, the dragon, right, is moving like this. It's not a coincidence all this stuff is happening where you're having these what's the word I'm looking for? Spreads and outbursts of the virus again. It's because he knows. Because you have to look at the timing. You had Kanye come in with all that information, what he was saying, right? Then you have Kyrie, his situation. They can see a pattern of what's happening, right? These prominent Israelites in the world are saying very damaging things to them, right? So now they got to move faster because they know, and they can see it actually, because they see everything. They have the algorithms and stuff and tweets, and they know what Israelites are thinking. They can see that Israel's getting stirred up, so they got to start pushing their agenda a lot faster, right? But they don't know they're playing spiritual chess with Yahweh Hashem Yahshai. So you're gonna lose, because when you start to panic in any game, that's when you make mistakes. I'm just saying it on that level. At the end of the day, they're gonna make mistakes anyways, because that's part of the script. But let's just talk about, if you're playing a game, you're playing chess with someone, right? When they start to panic because they get in their emotions, they get impatient, they make mistakes, right? And that's what Esau's doing, because Esau's impatient. Remember, he sold his birthright for uncooked meat because he was impatient. He didn't want to wait for it to be cooked properly. He just like, oh, no, I'm just going to sell it. I want to eat right now, right? So it's in his nature to be like that, right? But at the end of the day, like I said, it's all part of the plan for him to do these things because it's in the prophecies. So no matter what Esau does, he's screwed. He's not going to win. Jeremiah 30:7, alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it, right? And who's going to be saved? Jacob will be saved out of this trouble, of Jacob's trouble, because at the end of the day, Israel will be saved out of it because they're going to be saved through the elect, right? The 2/3 of Israel are going to die, but they're going to come back in the elect because the elect are going to be saved. So at the end of the day, Jacob's still going to be saved out of it, right? But really, it's talking about the elect. So now let's go to Revelation 16:15. Revelation 16:15, behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. And keeping his garment is his truth, right? His truth, the wine, the oil, right? Keeping your candle lit, right? Keeping it, right? Because Yahweh Shai is going to come as a thief. So he's going to come when you least expect, right? Because even to the ones that are watching, they're going to see the signs of him coming, but the exact time of when he comes, we're not going to know that. No one knows that. So that's why he's going to come as a thief. But because we're watching, right, and keeping our garments, right, even though he comes as a thief, we're not going to get caught off guard. It's like, when you're working at your job and you weren't working, or sorry, you have a job and you weren't working, right? And the boss comes out of nowhere and catches you sleeping on the job. You're in trouble now, right? But say you're at your job and you're working, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Your boss comes to see you, just check up on you, and he sees you're doing your job. He's like, oh, this guy's a good worker, right? He's not going to catch you doing something you're not supposed to be doing because you're working the whole time, right? So that's how you have to be. You have to constantly be working. So when Yahweh Shai comes, because even though we know we're going to see when the time, or we're going to be watching to see the prophecies unfold to see when he's coming, but we don't know the exact time. But when he does come, you want him to see you, or you want him to come when you're working, when you have your garments, you're working, you're building yourself in the truth, you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing, right? You don't want him to come when you're sleeping, right? When you put your garments in your storage. And I'm talking about spiritual garments, not your physical garments. Right? That's why it says, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. Because without those garments, you're going to be naked. Right? And he's not taking a naked person to the wedding. You can't marry a naked bride. Right? Imagine getting married and your bride is naked. You can't marry her. Where's your garments? Where's your wedding dress? Right? And I'm talking about We're spiritual brides to Yahushua, because Yahushua is the bridegroom and we're the brides. So if we're the brides, we have to have our wedding dress, so to speak, our wedding garments. So the last one, actually, let me just read the end of this article. Let's see if there's anything else. Okay, there's nothing really else there. So Matthew 22 and 11. Matthew 22 and 11. And when the king came, which is Yahushua, in to see the guests, he saw there a man which had on which slack. And when the king came in to see the guests, he saw there a man which had not on a wedding garment. And he said unto him, Friend, how camest thou in hither not having a wedding garment? So he's like, how did you come inside of this place without a wedding garment on? Like, how did you get here? And he was speechless. So that's what's happened. If you don't have your wedding garment on, if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, plowing, doing the work, right? When Yahushua comes, you're getting caught off guard, right? But you're supposed to be staying on guard because you're watching. That's why the watchmen are always going to be watching. They're always going to be on guard. So he said, and he was speechless, right? And also that means that some people are going to think that they have the truth, but they really don't have the truth. They think they're doing the work, but they're really not doing the work. Right? That's why you have to make sure you have 100% truth. 100%. No holes in in the doctrine. Verse 13. Then said the king to the servants, Bind him hand and foot, and take him away, and cast him into utter darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen. So many are called to this truth, and many of them think that they have the full truth. But only a few are chosen to get the full truth, right? Which is the 144, right? The elect. Only a few are chosen to get the full truth, right? That's it on that. So hopefully this lesson was edifying to the hopeful elect, pushing his word in truth and sincerity across the four corners of the earth. Shalom until next time.